Members, come to the table, please. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Continue this afternoon on further panels pursuant to the order reference of Tuesday, May 9th on Bill C-44, an act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on March 22nd. We have two panels this afternoon. The first panel for the next hour and a half, and we will start with the Business Council of Canada.
Wants to speak before first. He has something to say before the witnesses start.
Okay, I understand, Mr. Berthold, do you have something you want to say before we start the panel?
Oui, merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, chers collègues.
Yes, thank you, Chair, colleagues. I just want to say this. I want to bring up a situation which occurred in the Transport Infrastructure Committee. We had the pleasure of welcoming a panel on Bill C-44, where for 2 hours people discussed the Bill C-44. It was, according to my colleagues who participated in the exchanges, there was very little time. To my surprise, that letter was sent this morning to the chair of the Finance Committee, and we were not aware of the fact that this letter was sent. It was supposed to apply to tomorrow as it was dated, and I'm not too sure what that letter it represents in terms of the fact that it was dated for tomorrow, but it was sent by the other committee that I mentioned. Transport wanted to have more time to be able to go over C-44, to be able to make recommendations to the Finance Committee specifically. I put this situation on the table because it was sent to the Finance Committee without a single member of the Transport Committee being advised. We had no knowledge of that letter or it's being sent here. This morning, I asked for a copy of the letter to be distributed not only to my opposition colleagues in the NDP, but also to my colleagues on the government side who had not received the letter as well. So I'm wondering about the procedure that was followed. What does this committee intend to do with a letter like that, knowing that the committee involved, Transport, didn't have time to discuss?
The letter may have come in this morning. I just now reading it. I think our, as you're well aware from the letter I wrote to your chair on behalf of this committee, we did farm out certain sections of Bill C-44, the Budget Implementation Act, to other committees. On this one that went to the Transportation Committee, it was, I believe, dealing with the Infrastructure Bank. It was our intention, or to the industry, it was our intention on that this committee, and we'd meetings this morning with witnesses, or was it yesterday? This morning. We've had so many meetings. We had witnesses this morning from the department on the Infrastructure Bank, and witnesses yesterday from various interest groups on the Infrastructure Bank, and it was our thought that the Transport Committee would look at infrastructure in terms of the kind of projects that would be held, etc., and this committee would look at the Infrastructure Bank from the aspect of the financing and financial matters. All I can say at this time is to thank you for that information. We will have to talk to the. I will talk to the chair of the Transport Committee, Permanent Committee on Transportation. And at this point, I think I'm unsure where to go, but I don't believe the aspect you folks were looking at will have a lot of implications on the bill, but we will be meeting as again on May 29th. If we have to do something on the morning of May 29th, we'll have to. Mr. Leipert.
No, you finish.
Yeah, I'm done.
Well, in that discussion with that chair, I think it would be appropriate to ask why members of the committee, after hearing from the various witnesses, weren't even given an opportunity to present recommendations or, some guidance to us based on, I mean, what the heck was the point of dragging all those witnesses before the committee and then basically just throwing it in the trash? So I think that it's incumbent upon you to impress upon that particular chair that there should be some outcome based on all of those witnesses who took the time to testify before the committee. We have no idea what was said.
I should make note that in the end, at the conclusion of the letter, Ms. Scrow, who's the chair of that committee, please note I invited committee members to contact the Parliamentary Council and Legislative Clerk assigned to Bill C-44 should members wish to draft amendments on their own initiative and to submit them directly to the Clerk of the Standing Committee on Finance before Friday, May 19th at 5 p.m. So there is, and I assume you've seen that, Luke. I have Mr. Dussault, and then I have Mr. Albas. Mr. Dussault.
Just a point that I think there's a lesson to learn from that, probably the next time we should put the vice chairs in CC of those letters as we send to the chairs. Because it seems that the problem here is that other members of the committee wasn't aware because the chair kept that for herself.
I think, I don't think so. The clerks were also informed, I think, weren't they, Madam Clerk? That the letters were coming, so it wouldn't be just the chair. The clerks of each committee were informed as well. Mr. Albas.
Yeah, briefly, Mr. Chair, I think the whole purpose of us sending that invitation, asking them to participate in the process, is obviously the members of that committee have some expertise in the area of infrastructure and whatnot. And as you said, those witnesses that they heard were very specific to it. So to have a process put in place on one end, but then to not actually complete the loop by involving members, I think is sad. It's a disappointment, I know, to my colleague. And I really just hope that when you have a discussion with the chair, that you point out that the whole purpose of the matter was, because we could have had the witnesses here, but it's the ability to draw out from those witnesses based on experience that I think that we were searching for their members, which include both the government and different opposition parties. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all, and we will follow up with the chair of the Transportation Infrastructure Committee. With that, we will turn to witnesses related to the Budget Implementation Act. Welcome all. Starting with the Business Council of Canada, Brian Kingston, who's the Vice President, Policy, International and Fiscal Issues.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. Thank you for the invitation to take part in your consultations on Bill C-44. I have some very short opening remarks, and I will give you the general overview from the Business Council perspective on the budget, and then I'll specifically talk about infrastructure and investment. So the Business Council of Canada represents the chief executives and entrepreneurs of 150 leading Canadian companies in all sectors and regions of the country. Our member companies employ 1.7 million Canadians, account for more than half the value of the Toronto Stock Exchange, contribute the largest share of federal corporate taxes, and are responsible for most of Canada's exports, corporate philanthropy, and private sector investments in R&D. In the Council's pre-budget submission, we urge the government to adopt a laser-like focus on competitiveness as the key to generating long-term economic growth and ensuring a better life for all citizens. We believe that Canada needs a focused strategy to encourage new business investment, attract international capital, and enhance Canada's ability to compete in the global economy. Among other recommendations, we called on the government to streamline the approval process for private sector infrastructure projects, develop a comprehensive plan to broaden the tax base and bring down rates, set out in detail a fiscally sustainable path to balanced budgets with a commitment to an explicit debt to GDP target. Acting on these recommendations would, among other things, help position Canada as a global trade and investment hub. And we believe this is increasingly important in the face of protectionist and competitiveness threats. So we welcome the government's efforts to establish the Canada Infrastructure Bank to attract private sector and institutional investment to new revenue-generating infrastructure projects. Targeted spending on productivity and trade-enhancing infrastructure projects would bolster Canada's long-term competitiveness. In our view, the Infrastructure Bank should be designed to stimulate, through open and competitive bidding, the development of infrastructure projects that would not otherwise be pursued by federal, provincial, or municipal authorities. But importantly, injecting new capital alone will not improve infrastructure. The federal government can lay the groundwork for new major infrastructure projects by ensuring that regulatory approval processes are transparent, predictable, fact-based, and capable of rendering decisions in a very timely manner. Turning to foreign investment, another important element of Bill C-44, the Business Council has long called for the creation of a single window to attract major investments to Canada, and for that reason we welcome the Invest in Canada hub. Canada's ability to attract foreign investment has diminished. In the early 1980s, the stock of inward foreign direct investment, FDI, as a share of GDP was higher in Canada than in countries such as Australia, Norway, Sweden, and the UK. Today, this situation is reversed, though. Canada lags all four of those countries as a destination for foreign investment. And over the same period, our country's share of global FDI stocks has fallen from 8% to just below 3%. And according to the 2016 World Investment Report, this is compiled by UNCTAD, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, Canada does not even rank among the top 15 prospective host economies for multinational investment for the 2016 to 2018 period. That's a drop from the 11th destination last year. And this is based on a survey of multinational executives, and we find that quite a worrying ranking. So we believe that the proposed investment hub will help Canada reverse these worrying trends and bring new investment into Canada. And finally, we believe that foreign investment is, except in very unique circumstances, beneficial to Canada. And for that reason, we support raising the Investment Canada Act review threshold to $1 billion in Bill C-44. With that, I conclude my remarks and look forward to questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Turning to the Canadian Steel Producers Association, Mr. Weigel, Vice Chair, Trade and Policy, Public Policy Committee, and Mr. Young Steinberg, Director. The floor is yours, Mr. Weigel.
Thank you. Good afternoon, honourable members of the committee, and thank you for the opportunity to present today on behalf of the Canadian Steel Producers Association, or CSPA, as regards to Bill C-44, an amendment or an act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on March 22, 2017. The CSPA is the national voice of Canada's $14 billion primary steel production industry, and Canadian steel producers are integral to the automotive, energy, construction, and other demanding industrial supply chains. CSPA seeks to work with governments and industry to partner to advance on public policies that enable a globally competitive business environment for its member companies and various supply chain stakeholders. As committee members are aware, the global steel industry is at an inflection point as the result of growing overcapacity and direct state intervention in the sector. Canadian producers are not immune or are sheltered from the truly unprecedented international challenges that currently face the sector. The steel industry has, on a worldwide basis, seen a significant increase in market-distorting dumping and circumvention practices, both from China directly and from a host of other global producers, whose home markets have also, in many cases, suffered because of unfair Chinese competition. To put this in perspective, the root cause of our issue is that there's 700 million tons of global excess capacity in the steel market, and that's in a market of 1.6 billion tons. And out of that 700 million tons of excess capacity, over 400 million tons of that is in China. Simply put, this steel has to go somewhere. And the price deterioration and the market instability associated with illegal steel trade has contributed significantly to our industry's challenges and are hurting middle-class Canadian families. As a direct result, investment in Canadian facilities, capacity utilization, and employment are under threat throughout Canada's steel production and manufacturing sectors. With this in mind, the CSPA welcomes the Government of Canada's Budget 2017 commitments to improve its ability to remedy dumped and subsidized imports by implementing measures that effectively modernize the Canadian trade remedy system. Specifically, the CSPA appreciates the amendments in Budget 2017 to the Special Import Measures Act, or CIMA. These four major amendments provide for the following. Firstly, the ability to expand a trade remedy measure to address circumvention of dumping duties. Secondly, more transparent and predictable enforcement of trade remedy measures. Thirdly, the ability to address market distortions in the country of export when establishing dumping margins. And lastly, the ability for unions to now participate in trade remedy proceedings. With these changes, taken in conjunction with the changes that were implemented in Budget 2016, the Canadian government has taken meaningful, substantive, and timely steps to modernize Canada's trade remedy system. Almost as importantly, these trade defense mechanisms also send an important signal to our closest trading partner, the United States, that Canada remains a partner equally committed to battling and addressing unfair trade. In this regard, in 2015 and 2016, the U.S. implemented their own trade remedy modernization via the Enforce Act and the Level the Playing Field Act. So now Canada and the United States are on equal footing from a trade remedy standpoint. However, recently, the U.S. has initiated processes like the ongoing 232 investigation on the effect of imports on steel on U.S. national security and a consultation concerning construction of pipelines using domestic, i.e. U.S., steel and iron. As we seek exclusions from future U.S. findings or actions, reminding the U.S. administration of both our existing joint efforts on steel enforcement and our renewed legislative commitments to combating unfair steel trade in North America will be essential. In closing, I would remind this committee that unfairly traded goods pose a clear and present threat to the livelihoods of over 22,000 middle-class Canadians and their families employed directly in steel production, and the additional 100,000 Canadians whose employment is indirectly impacted by this sector. Steel production in Canada involves significantly advanced manufacturing processes, and Canada's steelworkers are well educated, highly skilled, and trained throughout their careers. With this in mind, I urge this committee to recommend the passage of amendments in Bill C-44 related to strengthening of Canada's response to unfair trade and to encourage the government's quick implementation of the related regulations. This will allow our industry to take advantage of these new legislative tools to defend against the well-documented and corrosive impacts of global overcapacity and unfair trade in steel. I thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weigel. With the Consider Canada City Alliance, Mr. Darsh, President, and Mr. Paddock Carrick. The floor is yours.
It is my pleasure to address you today to give the support of the Consider Canada City Alliance to the Invest in Canada Act and its implementation. My name is Michael Darch. I am the president of the Consider Canada City Alliance. With me is Blair Padaker, who is the chair of our Government Relations Committee, as well as the managing director, Investment and Trade here at Invest Ottawa. I intend to address 3 points today. First of all, the support of the CCCA and its members for the investment hub to be established by Bill C-44, the benefits and relationships that would be established between our members and the hub, and activity already underway to ensure the economic opportunities presented by the establishment of the hub are quickly and effectively achieved. First, a short introduction to the CCCA. Seven of Canada's large cities came together in Calgary in 2007 to explore common challenges in attracting foreign investment to Canada. That collaboration continued with the Invest in Canada Bureau within Foreign Affairs. In 2012, we incorporated as a not-for-profit organization. Today, the CCCA includes 13 of Canada's largest municipal investment promotion agencies, stretching from Halifax to Vancouver. Together, the economic influence zones of the members encompass all or part of 14 of Canada's census metropolitan areas that represent 49.6% of Canada's population, 65.1% of Canada's GDP, and 83.4% of Canada's GDP growth between 2011 and 2016. The mission of the Consider Canada City Alliance is to contribute to a sustainable and globally competitive national economy built on the collective strength of the ecosystems in each member region. The members of the CCCA were therefore delighted with the announcement in the fall 2016 economic statement of the intent to create the Invest in Canada Hub. The members of the CCCA view the creation of the hub as a significant commitment by the Government of Canada to the importance of foreign direct investment as a generator of wealth, the creation of jobs across all demographics, and an essential stimulant to the innovation economy in Canada. The Invest in Canada Act contained in Bill C-44 translates that intent into reality. The members of the CCCA welcome the opportunity to contribute to the success of the investment hub so as to assist in optimizing the overall effectiveness of both the hub and also municipal efforts to attract investors to Canada. We do not minimize the complexity and challenge of the endeavor to create the hub. We would offer whatever assistance we can to ensure the success of the project. We agree with the assertion made in the fall economic statement. Around the world, leading companies are looking for stable places to invest and grow their businesses. Smart countries are mobilizing to take advantage of the opportunities and jobs that go hand in hand with global investment. Canada cannot afford to be left behind. We look forward to the hub becoming the single window for the investor looking to invest in Canada. It is our hope that the hub will become the single access point for municipalities to the Canadian government for matters relating to investment attraction. Therefore, it is our aspiration that the hub would have the capacity to assist, advise, and champion on matters such as immigration policy and processes, federal incentive programs, federal economic development agencies, policies with respect to investment promotion, the development and marketing of the Canada brand, and lead generation and client servicing. Similarly, the municipalities will ensure that each designate a contact for the hub on matters related to investment attraction matters within their jurisdiction. Furthermore, should the decision be made to place hub officers in locations across Canada, we strongly recommend that the officer be co-located with our respective member. Finally, we would welcome the role of the hub coordinating Team Canada missions in support of trade and investment. It is our hope that the operating relationship be founded on the principles of collaboration, complementarity, and consistency. Already, the CCCA and its members are working to make the hub a success. Each member already has a concierge service for incoming and existing foreign investors that will be available to the hub. A close working relationship has been established with the hub implementation team, and meetings are held regularly. All members participated in the KPMG outreach led by the Privy Council Office on attracting foreign direct investment to Canada. All members have been invited to be referral partners for the new dedicated service channel being established by Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada. The CCCA chair participated in a deputy minister level consultation roundtable on the development of the hub. We are working with the Trade Commissioner Service to ensure that the 15 new investment officers expected to be hired this year under the hub program are fully aware of the services, capabilities, and value propositions represented by each of our members. In summary, the CCCA 1 fully supports the Invest in Canada Hub and the legislation contained in C-44 to bring it to reality, is fully committed to the economic advantages to be gained by Canada through the provision of a single service window for foreign investors that integrates the resources of all levels of government, and 3, it is actively working with the hub implementation team and its federal partners to ensure that Canada reaps the maximum economic benefit from the global opportunities available today. I thank you for your time. I look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Darsh. Turning to intermedia partners, Mr. Hindery, and just maybe a little explanation. First of all, thank you, Mr. Hindery, for making the special effort to get here. I know there was some juggling of time, but for committee members, Mr. Hindery, I think your home base is New York, but I do know you spoke to the National Governors Association on infrastructure bank thoughts in the United States, and I think your experience might be helpful to members here as we look at going down this road. So thank you very much for making the effort to come to Canada.
Mr. Chairman, it was not that much of an effort, and it's a privilege to be with you and your members this afternoon. The issue of large-scale infrastructure investment, as we all know, is foremost about stewardship. But sadly, in most of the developed countries of the world, our eyes, so to speak, have always been larger than our stomachs. We all want lots of it, but only a few governments, particularly the government of Germany, have been sufficiently responsive in trying to pay for the overall trillions of dollars worth of investment which we need. Public investments, whether they be in surface transportation projects, electricity transmission projects, broadband, especially airports and wastewater projects, are at some of their lowest levels since records have been kept. Yet we know that these massive deficits persist despite the fact that infrastructure investment is perfectly poised to take advantage of the growth sectors in energy, driverless vehicles, and clean tech that are just now starting to wash over all of manufacturing. And especially despite the fact that a nationwide, decade-long program of infrastructure investment, with its massive multiplier effects throughout the whole of an economy, is best positioned to close persistent real unemployment gaps, which in the United States is on the order of an additional 5%, despite our last month now having nominal full employment. America's overall deficit for revenue-generating infrastructure is estimated by our American Society of Civil Engineers to be $3.3 trillion, of which $1.5 trillion is clearly outside the capabilities of our state and our municipal budgets. This is why the infrastructure issue is one of the 4 main platform pillars of our November 2016 national election. President Trump, Secretary Clinton, and Senator Bernie Sanders each called for spending in excess of $1 trillion on public infrastructure but at the time of the election, only Secretary Clinton had begun to settle on how to best pay for such massive investment, using perhaps the structure which we will discuss this afternoon and which I advised her on. To address investment shortfalls, there are in the developed countries usually only three meaningful infrastructure funding alternatives. And in my opinion, two of them immediately fail because they are in each case too small and too politicized. The two alternatives which fail are smallish block grants, whether they be authorized by our Congress or your Parliament, of the sort we've seen for decades. The second alternative is a so-called budgetary cap devoted exclusively to investments in infrastructure, since the budgetary caps in the developed countries, whether they be for defense or non-defense spending, typically do not provide opportunities to allocate funds for infrastructure. It's practically impossible, however, under appropriations bills, in my opinion, to depoliticize and especially to fairly prioritize infrastructure projects spread over myriad states, provinces, or municipalities. And most important, neither alternative comes anywhere close to meeting the massive needs figures of our respective countries. In short, we believe that only sensitively developed national infrastructure banks address the otherwise limitations, the otherwise obstacles. The bank we are proposing for the United States would be a wholly owned government corporation with nonpartisan directors appointed by the President and confirmed by our Senate. By law, the bank's investment decisions would be made in a transparent, nonpartisan manner, and in order to make the bank as responsive as possible to different infrastructure needs across our country, it would, like our Federal Reserve, be regionalized into operating districts. Notably, the bulk of the bank's capital structure, fully 90% of the total, would come from relatively low interest rate loans to the bank by our nation's large state and municipal pension plans and by certain sovereign wealth funds such as Norway's and Kuwait's. Only the remaining 10% would be appropriated by Congress, and that would be in the form of a shared first dollar of loss guarantee of the bank's loans to infrastructure projects. In specific terms, $1.35 trillion of the bank's capitalization would come from large fiduciaries, and the first $300 billion of loss, if any, on the bank's project loans would be shared 50-50 between the bank and the U.S. Treasury. It is the fiduciary plan's relatively low rate of return expectations on their fixed income portfolios of just 2 to 3%, which match up best, Mr. Chairman, with the vital objective of achieving for the bank the lowest possible cost of capital, which unfortunately has never been the case with so-called P3s, as we can elaborate. And of course, the plans are induced to invest in the bank by the support available to them from the shared federal guarantee. In considering this particular bank structure, it's especially important to note that because the financial default rate on public infrastructure projects is consistently de minimis, on the order of just 1% or less, our particular Office of Management and Budget, what we refer to as OMB, should, we believe, based both on precedent and on the very low risk profile of the shared federal guarantees, score for Congress only the cost, Mr. Chairman, only the cost of any actual drawn down federal guarantee payments, and then only if and when these support payments are made. The major reason that the federal guarantee would score so little or not at all is that the borrowers would typically pay a very small guarantee fee that is set over time to cover anticipated costs of defaults. And since well-run credit programs usually run at zero subsidy, this should mean, in the specific case of our proposed U.S. National Infrastructure Bank, little or zero actual cost to American taxpayers. Almost 10 years ago this month, Mr. Chairman, we started out with the nonpartisan objectives of 1, best financing the more than $1 trillion of needed infrastructure projects while minimizing the federal government's contribution, and 2, most fairly prioritizing projects given the broad array of projects in our very physically large country. We believe that our suggested National Infrastructure Bank meets these goals, and it will be a privilege, Mr. Chairman, for you to hear from you and your members on some of this work in the Q&A. Thank you, sir, very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hendry. Tourism Industry Association of Canada, Ms. Charlotte Bell. The floor is yours, Charlotte.
Thank you very much. Monsieur le Président, chers députés.
Chairman, honourable members, on behalf of the Tourism Industry Association of Canada, we are pleased to appear before you today as part of your 2017 budget study.
Representing the interests of all sectors of the tourism industry in Canada. This includes accommodations, transportation, destinations, and attractions. Our members range in size from small businesses, including many tour operators, to some of Canada's largest hotel chains, national airlines, rail services, destinations, and iconic tourist attractions from coast to coast to coast. Tourism is a top economic driver for Canada, which last year generated $91.6 billion in revenues, surpassing forestry, agriculture, and fisheries combined. It also employs in excess of 627,000 Canadians and is considered a top employer of Canadian youth. The first thing I'd like to do is reiterate our gratitude for the support received by the Minister of Small Business and Tourism, as well as the Minister of Finance, concerning a number of positive commitments in the last budget. Specifically, we were pleased with news that Destination Canada, Statistics Canada, and Indigenous tourism will receive much-needed funding to support tourism marketing, data collection, and Indigenous tourism development. These are important initiatives that will reap significant benefits for the Canadian economy, job creation in the long term, and help strengthen one of the primary growth industries in this country. This said, changes to the Foreign Visitor Tax Rebate Program, which is called FCTIP, and proposed implementation have created a wave of concern and alarm within the tourism industry. And as we try to obtain an interpretation from CRA as to how the changes will be implemented, there continues to be anxiety. While the stated goal of this proposed repeal is to eliminate inefficient tax measures, it may very well create financial hardship on a number of small tourism businesses across the country and will also make Canada even less cost competitive than it is today. While tourism has seen important gains in international arrivals in the last couple of years, and especially last year, it's important to recognize that globally, Canada is in 18th position in terms of international arrivals, falling behind countries like Saudi Arabia. And for perspective, in 2000, Canada ranked 8th in the world, so we've lost some ground. In terms of our cost competitiveness relative to other countries, Canada now ranks 97th out of 141 countries, measured annually by the World Economic Forum. While the $15 million per year savings outlined in the supplementary budget documents may seem small and inconsequential, in reality, the change is cause for concern. While the GST-HST rebate may have appeared to be underutilized, it was widely used as a competitive tool to attract international travelers to Canada by lowering the cost of tour packages to make them more affordable. In the absence of this rebate, many businesses, including significant numbers of small and medium-sized tourism operators, will be left absorbing significant additional costs and, in some cases, eliminating their profits. Further, tour operators are also impacted as travel packages can be pre-sold up to 2 years in advance and sometimes even longer. The rebate is usually built into the price of packages offered internationally, but actual payment doesn't occur until well after the travel has occurred. In fact, sometimes it can be as late as 3 months later. We understand that the proposed repeal is meant to apply in respect of supplies of tour packages or accommodations made after Budget Day. This implies that contracts made prior to Budget Day would still be eligible for the rebate. Given the business cycle operates up to 2 years in advance, many contracts have been solidified well into 2018 with secondary agreements made under this umbrella. The fact that we don't yet know whether those secondary agreements will benefit from the current rebate is cause for concern. The Minister of Small Business and Tourism unveiled a new tourism vision last week during Canada's largest travel trade show in Canada, which is Rendezvous Canada. The minister set out bold goals for tourism growth in the coming years and recognized the importance of this sector to Canada's economy and to its job creation, and so do we. We fully support and embrace growth and intend to work closely with the minister and others to see those goals become a reality. But in order to get there, Canada must address its cost competitiveness. Every new tax, every new levy, every new additional fee chips away at our ability to compete internationally and grow the sector. Tourism remains the only export sector in Canada that's not zero-rated. The GST-HST rebate, while perhaps imperfect, was at least one very small way of lowering costs, but now that too will be gone. As I said in my opening, Canada's tourism is a $91.6 billion sector, and we want to see that grow to $125 billion. But we need to address our cost competitiveness if we're going to increase overall tourism numbers by 30% in the next few years. Otherwise, the numbers may very well go in a different direction. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bell, and thank all you for your presentations, a number of different subject areas today. Starting 7-minute rounds, Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here today. Mr. Hindery, thank you for your presentation. We've had a lot of talk earlier today on the proposed infrastructure bank here, and you outlined a few unique, what I would say, initiatives, one being, for example, the guarantee fee to help any costs of default or whatnot. So that's interesting. And then the low interest rates. We've heard testimony that will suggest an infrastructure bank, for it to be attractive to private investors, would require a higher interest rate. So what is the attraction under the proposal that you've put forward in your country in terms of the attracting businesses? Is it that stable 2% in their portfolios that they're looking for, or what is it that would attract that private industry?
When I say National Infrastructure Bank, ma'am, I never mean Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley. And the fault in our own country has been what's called P3s, the public-private partnerships. The cost of capital on the private side is usurious for the user community. Notably in the state of Pennsylvania, where great efforts were made to upgrade infrastructure, we ended up with roads and bridges that became unaffordable to the middle class because of the user fees. We had to find at once three things happening concurrently. We had to believe that the decisions would be made professionally and in a nonpartisan fashion. I had the privilege of meeting the chairman at the National Governors Association. They are the fiduciaries they are the stewards and the fiduciaries of infrastructure. It's not our Congress. It's our mayors and our governors. They want to know, in our particular case, that all 50 governors have an equal opportunity to see their projects prioritized and funded. The second objective was to make it very large, which is why block grants have historically been just whistling in the wind, so to speak. Even in President Obama's what we call his STIM package, his stimulus package after the crisis of 07-08, he got $25 billion for his infrastructure bank, which was nothing but a block grant to the Department of Transportation. Our need, and you have a relatively similarly large number, is $1.5 trillion. If you don't do something approximating that, don't do it, in my opinion. Wait for a better day. The third thing is to make sure that the rate is affordable to the ultimate user. And we very proudly, as does Canada, have tremendous fiduciary organizations. And if you talk to your colleagues on that side of this economy, a 2 to 3% return on their fixed income portfolios with a high certainty of repayment is more than satisfactory. It will never satisfy, ma'am, Goldman Sachs. We have in the White House today a new advisor to our recently elected president who comes from Goldman Sachs, who would like that to be the bank. He's suggesting rate of return of 10 to 11%. That'll crush the middle class and every user. So we have traveled for years now among the fiduciary community asking what would it take to get you to commit in a very large way, in a very large sense, to the bank we're suggesting. We've been to Kuwait, we've been to Norway, we've been to Japan, and we've been to our large state fiduciaries. And the answer is it had to be some degree of federal support. Where it got clever, I think, particularly, is we sort of added a fourth skizzle to the equation. The guarantee will never be drawn. the default rate on public infrastructure projects of the sort we're talking about, surface transportation, airports, broadband, especially, Mr. Chairman, and our airports, the default rate is around 1% if fairly priced. And so the guarantee will never be scored in our parlance. And I would suggest, from what little I know of your rules and behaviors, ma'am, it won't be scored here either. It will be scored if ever drawn. But there was no way coming out of the election, whether it had been Senator Sanders, Senator Clinton, or Mr. Trump, that anybody in our Congress was going to give them $1 trillion+. It's just not, it's inconceivable. 40 billion would be a stretch. And so our commercial banks said, come our way. Well, my answer is no way am I coming your way. So we've spent several years now, as I've tried to say, finding an alternative, and I think, ma'am, I think that's collectively is the alternative. And I think it works particularly well here, and the reason I'm comfortable saying so is because it similarly works well in Germany.
Thank you. It's interesting you say that, because I had attended a conference in Europe some time ago now talking about the need for, and there it might have been more commercial banks, but the almost desperation for investors to have even 2-3% stability because of the price of commodities and the fluctuation in commodities and the long-term payback of traditional investments like oil and gas, nuclear, that investors were looking, even though it's small, and traditionally one might assume that the private industry would only invest if it was a 10% payback. But the idea is that investors are actually looking for something that is stable and a much shorter payback. And you're the first person that has testified of what I had heard previously, probably almost a year ago now. And the other factor was not only stable, even if it was 2-3%, but stability in policy and government and direction. And that if we had policies that matched the direction of the types of infrastructure. So for example, if climate change is a priority for governments, and then investment in infrastructure, simultaneously, that was also a key indicator for private investments. Is that something you would have heard as well?
Ma'am, it's music sort of to my ears. I would like to add just two quick thoughts. Your new Prime Minister and Mr. Weigel have talked of the issue of your domestic steel producers, the real unemployment. Prime Minister Trudeau has talked about real unemployment in this country mirroring ours, which is roughly twice the nominal rates. Nothing in the world addresses infrastructure spending in steel, Mr. Weigel, jobs better than an infrastructure bank. It's the panacea for resuscitating manufacturing, but it's also a tremendous boost to the real unemployment challenges our countries face. With conviction, I can tell you that what you learned in Europe and in your reactions today are in conflict. The private sector does need double-digit returns. The public sector, the fiduciary community, is very comfortable, particularly with the sort of guarantee, ma'am, that we've suggested might be imposed on the top. And again, we all struggle with budget crises and scoring. We score pitifully in our country, and we think we have found a way that might be advantageous to our needs as well as yours.
Thank you both. Turning to Mr. Albas, 7 minutes there.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses and for the work you do for your different organizations and for enlightening us a little bit on your thoughts on C-44. As I come from the Okanagan, obviously the interior of British Columbia has a lot to offer in terms of tourism opportunities, so I'm going to start with Ms. Bell. Ms. Bell, thank you very much, and I actually find these, she's written down conveniently that there's 742 tourism operators in my area, as well as just under 8,500 people that work in the industry. So I have not seen the updated one, so I do appreciate you raising that today. Now, you have raised some legitimate concerns about our competitiveness. Obviously, I actually was at the industry committee this morning. The minister responsible for small business and tourism, Minister Chagger, was there, and the question was brought to her about, about competitiveness. And obviously, she said that one thing they need to do is look at other jurisdictions and make evidence-based decisions. So, do other jurisdictions that have a value-added tax or goods and services tax have a similar provision where, when you're trying to bring in business out of country, that there is a rebate?
Oh, goes on by itself. Yes, my understanding is actually many countries have these types of rebates. It's one of the reasons why we're not as competitive as a result of that.
Okay. So my imagining is that basically this will get tagged, and this has already been tagged on. So people are expected that if they sign a new agreement today, that they are collecting the GST on that, and that there will be no rebate for that. Is that correct?
Well, first of all, I guess there's a couple of things. There's the contracts signed after the budget is announced. As long as the payment has been made in full, according to the way it's been described in the budget documents, if the payment has been made in full before January 2018, then it would still apply. After that date, it wouldn't. But the confusion for us comes in terms of how the business works and how deals are signed, and you have a primary deal and then you have secondary contracts that flow from that.
And I saw this in British Columbia after the referendum on the harmonized sales tax, where I remember attending many different meetings with the home builders associations, where so many small business owners were asking questions of each other because they were getting different answers from government of what qualifies and what doesn't. And as you know, there are large tourism operators that can afford to have the people to do the research, and then there's also very small operations too that may not have the same capacity. So I certainly appreciate you raising some of this. But are you finding from your own members that there are concerns about confusion as to what qualifies and what doesn't?
We've asked, yes. I got a lot of questions, and I raised the issue that we were at Rendezvous Canada last week, because that is the biggest travel trade show in Canada, 1,800 delegates, and we had buyers, hundreds of buyers from across the world. I heard it from buyers, and I heard about it from my members, so a number of sellers who are based here in Canada. So yes, it is a concern. We're trying to understand, everyone understands that rules change, things can change, but we need some certainty moving forward to figure out how does this apply, and if it's going to change, can we at least mitigate the impact during the implementation phase or the interim period. And we're not clear. We've asked CRA for a ruling or an interpretation on that.
So there has not been a lot of clarity yet presented to you as far as transitional rules, so that people can know with confidence when they're booking, et cetera, or what applies, what doesn't.
That's right. We don't have certainty on that front.
Okay. It's really unfortunate that the rollout wouldn't be as seamless as it maybe perhaps could be. Just again, going back to the competitiveness, so are you asking just to say, listen, this is going to harm our competitiveness? We're just, I have many people that are very, very conscious of price of gas. It's gone down. People are driving across the border from the United States, et cetera. So you have it, just when they're starting to get some business, now suddenly you're going to have where they can't compete with some other operators from other jurisdictions. So are you saying do not proceed with this, or can you say again what you want from government?
Well, we would have hoped that the government wouldn't proceed with this. That was our first choice. But if the government will proceed with it, then we're asking at least to mitigate the impact during the interim period, and make sure that it's delayed enough so that it respects the contracts that are already in play, and so that we have some certainty. And the biggest problem really is that there are contracts that have been signed, and secondary contracts, and they go all the way through 2018. So this is problematic.
I have to? Great. I'd like to actually go to the steel producers, and certainly appreciate that your members produce a lot of great products. I was very proud to be support a government that made our national shipbuilding contracts where Canadian Steel was going to be a big part of that, because I do believe that there is a national interest in being able to maintain our steel capacity. That being said, though, there are, the economics, and so you always have to balance between what the consumer can pay. But I was very proud that the government had said that they would support the steel industry by making sure that those ships were built with Canadian steel. Now, from British Columbia again, the experience we had with a steel rebar, where we had Chinese, I think Turkish, and possibly Korean rebar coming in. It was challenged. Many provinces and many different groups participated in the process. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, the trade remedy really resulted in less Canadian steel being used and more American. At just how the whole process works. So given that there are so many different remedies here, can you say that we are not going to find ourselves that with this new rejig process, we may see similar kind of results?
We're very aware of the rebar situation, and I think you're referring to the public interest inquiry that was put forward by Government of British Columbia and the Constructions Association there. We would say that the purpose of trade remedies is to remove the distortions that are caused by unfair trade in the Canadian market. So at the end of the day, the way that the CITT finally ruled on that public interest inquiry was that the trade remedy brings back true market competition. So when one says that the price is lower with dumped steel, that is not an argument to be made that that is the right thing to do. Otherwise, we wouldn't be living in a lawful society here in Canada. And so when they made the decision to not reduce the duties on imports from the Asian countries into BC, it was predicated on that fundamental lawful belief of what competitive markets should be in Canada. And my understanding also is, contrary to yours, of what happened with steel in Canada, because after those duties were put in place, there was actually more steel that came in from Canadian steel producers into BC than prior to the duties.
My understanding is that Ontario still does not sell major product into BC, and that's where, at least I understand, the angst of the original action was. So it's just, to me, I worry that when we put these processes in place with the best of intentions, it ultimately ends up being where none of us are satisfied with the results.
Okay, that'll end that discussion. Mr. Dussault.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et merci à tous.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses today. I will be asking my questions in French. I'll try to ask everyone a question, so I hope the answers will be short. First of all, on foreign investment in Canada and the fact that the threshold for triggering reviews of foreign investment is being taken away in terms of Canadian businesses. Do you share the government's view? And it stated it before it when I asked the government the question that headquarters in Canada was a concern for many people, and the fact that there could be, with no review on the part of the Government of Canada, there could be a change in removal of headquarters. The answer that they gave me was Investment Canada is still good. We never had any problems. And it's positive when there are foreigners who are interested in investing in Canada. Do you then agree that all foreign investment is positive and it's okay for headquarters to be in Canada?
For the question, sir. Yeah, we believe that foreign investment is generally good, except in very unique circumstances, and a lot of foreign investment can lead to headquarters being established in Canada. And ISED tracks all foreign investment, even investments below the threshold, they still track them. So we welcome foreign investment, and we think by raising the threshold, you're just reducing another barrier to foreigners coming in, potentially putting a headquarter here. But obviously there's much more to that decision than just the threshold. It's access to talent, what's the tax rate, what are the various supply chain linkages that will make those decisions. But we are hopeful that this, combined with the Invest in Canada hub, will help attract more headquarters into Canada, because that is an area where Canada has generally lagged.
Merci pour cette réponse. Sinon, sur
Thank you for your answer. Now on steel, I'd like to know what you think. Is Bill C-44 able to correct the situation, that is the movement towards the countries that have local purchasing policies? If we think in terms of the U.S., buy American only, will that constitute a barrier for Canada in dealing with those countries? Do you think C-44 deals with this situation and its problems? What is your view? Is the problem more significant today than it was in the past? What is your thought on the matter?
I apologize, I can't answer in French due to my limited French abilities. But Bill C-44, its purpose is to address unfair trade. So steel or other goods that come in that are dumped and subsidized and distort the market and injure Canadian industry. From a procurement perspective, and what you're referring to is the Buy America provisions in the United States, that is a completely different issue, which Bill C-44 doesn't address. But if we just discuss that a little bit, Canada does have procurement provisions, and if we're going to be spending the billions of dollars that we indicate we are moving forward into the future here in Canada, then we should be looking at potential Canadian preferences, and particularly given the nexus now of what we're talking about from a trade standpoint and from an environmental standpoint, which is now becoming more critical for Canada. So to give you an example, Canadian steel used in Canada has 1/3 of the carbon footprint that steel from offshore does. So when we put forward a procurement policy here in Canada, we should be looking at that and saying, if both of those are important to us, the environment is important to us, then we should be looking at what products are we actually using in our procurement policies and from where to reduce that overall carbon footprint. Because in a nutshell, you buy Canadian steel, you get a 2/3 discounts on the carbon footprint. And that is something that is being elevated now in terms of after COP21 and everything else in Paris, of the impact of carbon in the environment on Canada's procurement policies. And we're very hopeful in working with the government on those sorts of measures that would help the economy and help the environment.
Merci.
Thank you. Now for investing in Canada. With respect to the hub, I can't think of the word in French for hub, but you said that you saw the possibility or maybe an advantage where Canadian municipalities or other persons could directly address this organization. Can you perhaps expand on this idea for us? Initially, it was thought that it was going to be there as a type of interlocutor with those who sought to invest in Canada, but now it's appearing to be a one-stop shopping, single-wicket entity as to how you can invest and develop your business in Canada. Can you confirm that this business will also be open to Canadians in general and to the municipalities so that they can ask their questions and find out how a foreign investor can deal with municipality in Canada?
In Canada, we have 3 levels of government. the federal government, the province, and the individual cities. Individual investors will end up ultimately in a city somewhere. Often it will be, they are originally identified by our trade commissioners, etc., overseas. We already have regular twice-a-year meetings between our municipalities and the federal government on how we can make that interaction between the federal government and our municipalities easier, how we can make it better so that if we've identified a particular client, have immigration questions, they can be resolved. In the past, each federal department has tended to view this separately, and you've had to set up relationships with each individual department. It is hoped that when the hub comes into place, we will have one place where we can go to get that interaction with the federal government. We fully expect that the organization will be listening to the individual municipalities and will be responding to the individual municipalities. For the hub to be successful, it's going to have to place that investment into a municipality somewhere across Canada. It's the municipalities themselves who have the in-depth knowledge, such as Blair has of the Ottawa ecosystem, and where that investment is going to be best placed and how they can best explain that. And I think that all the action we've had, all the interaction we've had so far has been very positive.
Thank you. Thank you both. We're over time. Mr. Fergus.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to apologize to all the witnesses who have come here today because I don't have questions for everybody, but I do have specific ones for one or two and maybe three persons.
Infrastructure Bank. And I'm very interested, Mr. Kingston and Mr. Hindery in particular, if you could tell me why you feel that the Infrastructure Bank is a welcome, I mean, gathered from your comments that you find that it's a welcome tool to have in Canada, but how is it an improvement over public-private partnerships?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for the question. We think the P3 model in Canada has actually been very successful. And the Infrastructure Bank could still use the P3 model. So I don't see the Infrastructure Bank as necessarily an improvement over the P3 model. Our hope is that it will address projects that wouldn't go ahead with...
I'm sorry, so you said a welcome addition.
Right, right, yes, yeah. And so our hope is that it will go and it will be used to help bring in private capital into projects that would not go ahead without this bank. So this is, this mega project idea. So that's our hope. And those could still be done using a P3 model through the Infrastructure Bank. So we think it's a welcome addition to the overall infrastructure financing environment in Canada.
Mr. Hindery, in your experience in the United States?
I would kilt off two of the P's. I'm a complete believer in the private sector supplying the materials. I believe in the private sector constructing the infrastructure. I do not believe in the private sector financing the infrastructure. I've just seen too many instances throughout the world where the private financing piece of it, as I explained to your colleague, has left the user community on its knees. I don't believe it's a complement to the P3s, the bank. I think it's a substitute for failed P3s, sir.
Good. Thank you. If you could just go a little bit further on that, are there? I understand where you were when you were speaking to Ms. O'Connell about some of the failures of the P3s and your experience in the United States. But what is it about the financing of it that in particular, almost in your view, almost automatically leads to a problem, whereas Mr. Kingston would have a different point of view on that in terms of it could be P3 models have worked. Is it because of the structure of the financing, or is it in terms of the overall the end game of the financing in terms of when it reverts back to a public ownership?
I think, sir, it's simply the contrast between OMERS and Toronto Dominion Bank. Toronto Dominion Bank simply cannot lend to these kind of projects at 2% and 3% interest rates. They won't. Also, the life of these projects is very long. It tends to outstrip the desired lifetime of the private finance sector. Yet OMERS, on behalf of its fiduciary clients, would, to Ms. O'Connell's comments in my response, would be thrilled to get an assured 2 to 3% return on the fixed income portion of its portfolio. OMERS has private equity investments that push 20% return on invested capital. I'm not talking about that world. I'm talking about the world of the fixed income portfolios. And I've not spoken with OMERS, but I've talked to CalPERS, Ohio PERS, New York PERS, Illinois PERS, New Jersey PERS, Kuwait, as I said, Norway and Japan, and all of their fiduciary sectors would comfortably engage in a 2 to 3% return in the U.S. infrastructure. I have no doubt that they would find infrastructure here even more interesting.
I would just point to the Canadian track record on P3. So we've been doing these for about 22 years now. We've had over 236 projects and nearly $100 billion spent. And there are many, many examples of very successful P3s. So I think Canada's done a good job here. I don't know about the US experience, so I can't comment on that. I think we built up a lot of very good knowledge on how to do these projects the right way. So,
in both of your perspectives, it would appear that when you are engaging in fixed income portfolios with 2 or 3% returns, that the advantage is when you're one of the first entries into the market, into the global market, seeking out funds which are looking for those opportunities for stable fixed income potentials. Are we at the vanguard, or is there still a market, or how soon will it take before other countries clue into the importance of having their own infrastructure banks?
I definitely don't believe we're at the vanguard. I think other countries have adopted this model. Australia has a good example of a model that's been quite successful. But that said, there's a lot of capital out there. There's no shortage of capital in the world. So even if we're a few years behind, I don't think that we're at risk of not being able to attract this capital into Canada. It's the quality of the project that will determine.
I don't think you're behind at all, sir. I think you're on the cusp. We're not there yet, but we know we can't afford the alternative. I have been working with the Trump administration as well as both sides of the aisle in our Senate, and we can't pay for what we want.
Okay, just spinning off that line of questions before I go to Mr. Leipert to the Business Council, which relates to capital. You indicated we should be able to attract the capital, but you say in your submission that the foreign direct investment as share of the GDP, we've now fallen behind 4 countries where we're ahead of them. And we don't even rank among the top 15 prospective host economies for multinational enterprise investment. From your perspective, what's the reason for that? We will be this fall in pre-budget hearings likely looking at barriers to economic growth, competitiveness, and productivity. But what's, from your perspective, the reason why we're not attracting that capital?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One thing that the Council has called for a long time, and I know that this committee has looked at it closely and we think would really help attract greater investment, is comprehensive tax reform. Having a tax system that is very clear and concise with a minimal number of taxing points. We do a survey every year of our members, and we collect data on 68 different taxing points, and that's just the beginning of the various places where they're taxed. So if you actually streamline the system and made it simpler, it would be easier to comply, it'd be easier for the government to actually collect revenue, and it would make it much more straightforward for foreign investors to come to Canada if we had a clear and concise tax code. So that, to me, is one of the main drivers. Of course, so there are a whole suite of other considerations, including market access into other large markets and talent and so on. In some of those areas we score very highly, and others we're middle of the pack.
Thank you. Mr. Leipert. We'll go to 5-minute rounds.
Mr. Kingston, I believe one of the things that the finance minister has done very strategically is slip this idea of the infrastructure agency into the middle of a very thick document called the Budget Implementation Act. And as you can see by the discussion today and the witnesses that we've had throughout these hearings, it's all focused on the infrastructure initiative. But Part 4 of Division 2, and I believe that part of that strategy is to take away the focus on something like Part 4, Division 2. And let me just read what that is. It is the enactment of Borrowing Authority Act. This document gives the Canadian government the ability to borrow up to $1.3 trillion. And that covers $691 billion of federal debt, which equates to $7,000 per family of four, $276 billion in crown debt, and interest payments of $25 billion a year. And I guess one of the things that I think has happened here is, has the Council of Canadians, Business Council, just simply given up on the idea that we should be focusing on our debt payments and on our significant debt situation and be totally focused on stuff like the infrastructure bank?
Sir, absolutely not. And in my opening remarks, I made the point that one of the things that we asked the government going into this budget was a very clear fiscal anchor, because we are extremely concerned about the fiscal situation at both the federal and the provincial level. So it is absolutely a priority for the council, and it will continue to be. And as if we have the privilege of being asked to appear here before the next budget, we will make that point again. But we think there needs to be a clear path to balance and a very clear debt to GDP.
Yeah, because, you know, I think we're on a path that infrastructure bank or no, the country's going bankrupt because of uncontrolled spending.
Yeah, our concern is that, particularly at the provincial level, as the aging population drives up health costs, ultimately that will be borne by the federal government. And so we do think that there's this...
Just to be clear, the numbers I mentioned at the outset are doubled if you add provincial debt into that. Mr. Hendry, is there an infrastructure bank in the States, or is that something you're dreaming about?
Well, it's something I'm hoping for, Mr. Leipert. No, we don't have one. What we have is $1.5 trillion of unmet needs, and if you've traveled in our country, you can see it firsthand. But we have our own budget concerns, which I share your concern absolutely, which is why we can't look to our federal government. We have to find, in my opinion, monies elsewhere, and there are ready monies elsewhere that would like this kind of investing without burdening our federal government.
Yes, but in this particular model, there is substantive federal government money in the infrastructure bank.
And I would find that objectionable, sir.
So do we. Not that it's objectionable, not that it's necessarily objectionable, it's that there is a huge risk to the taxpayer.
And we've done everything we can from our vantage point to obviate that, to find an alternative source. Every developed country is in budgetary crisis, in my opinion, because of our payments that we are committed to.
Okay, so I just want to get clarity. The proposal that's in front of us is talking about $35 billion of federal money into the infrastructure bank, and I think it's 4 times the hopeful attractiveness. Is that a sound model?
It would be rude for me to suggest, sir. I was simply asked to convey an alternative to what you are considering, which it's not for me to comment on Canadian government practice. It's just not, sir. My role here was to give you an alternative that I think is attractive, that doesn't burden the Canadian taxpayer as is being suggested.
Thank you. And do I still have a little time?
You've got time for one quick question.
Yeah, I want to ask the tourism folks, if there was one thing that could have been in this budget that would move Canada back from 18th to 8th, what would it be?
Oh, my goodness. We would have to bring in another 16 million travelers internationally in order to get back into the top 10, by the way.
Something that, I'll just throw out this idea.
Cost of airfare.
Sorry?
The cost of airfare,
Right.
there's...
But as an example, one of the promises in the last election campaign was a reduction of small business tax from 10 to 9%. What would that impact be on, because you're basically small business, right?
Lots of our members are small businesses, but I don't know how that would grow tourism in Canada. I mean, I think the small businesses would be in better financial shape.
Spend more money on marketing instead of paying government.
They might, yeah. But definitely if there was one thing that we could do to increase the number of tourists, I would say, if I had to say off the top of my head, definitely we need to reduce the price of airfare because of the taxes and levies. We're about 40% higher than most places in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Mr. Sheehan, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to redirect some of my questions to Henry. You mentioned that there was 122,000 direct and indirect jobs in the steel industry. Well, 14,000 of those direct and indirect jobs are in Sault Ste. Marie at SR Steel and Tenaris Tubes, along with 8,000 other pensioners that live in the area as well. So I wanted to ask you about Budget 2016 that you alluded to, and the modernization and the trade remedies that were put in there. Have they been successful? And describe what they did for the industry before I get on to 2017.
So the changes in 2016, the major one there was that the initial trade remedy, which were previous to that, were for 5 years, are now going to be for almost 6 years. So that's in line with what the United States and other major countries throughout the world have. So the new cases that we've had, so we just had another rebar case, we have some OCTG cases, all those now will have the brand new 6-year time frame associated with them, which will help the industry.
That's very good. So moving on to, and part of the 2016 budget was the consultation process that you and your association, along with the unions and many other stakeholders, vigorously participated in, and it was great. There was 4, in my opinion, key recommendations that came forward in the 2017 budget. One on particular market situation, one on anti-circumvention, and one on scope rulings. And of course the union participation, which you talked about. Could you please describe to us how those 4 particular items, how they will work within the industry and how they'll benefit?
Sure. The biggest change we were after was around what Member Sheehan mentioned, was around particular market situation. And what that is the companies outside of North America, offshore, are getting really, really smart at trying to circumvent anti-dumping duty orders. So they will do things in order to have their costs and prices not reflect market realities, thereby reducing their dumping margins and hurting Canadian steel producers. So what this does, it now gives the Canadian government officials within CBSA the ability to say, hey, your prices and costs aren't actually market-based. There's something happening in your market that is distorting it, and we're going to adjust for those factors to bring it up to a market-based price or cost, and therefore have the appropriate dumping margin. That was the first one. The second one was around scope rulings. So this is an increase in the transparency of the process, where if a producer here in Canada or someone from offshore says we want to know whether this product is within scope or not in scope of a ruling previously, that would kind of be done without everybody knowing about it. Now it's going to be a transparent process where companies can participate and actually determine whether the product is or without scope, and provide arguments either way, similar to how it was done in other countries at this time. And then there was another big area was around anti-circumvention. So now there will be a formal process that if countries outside of Canada try to cheat the system through either mislabeling or transshipment of products, then we are able to then have a process and actually provide dumping duties on those products who are actually trying to cheat the Canadian system and the Canadian government and its people.
And as you mentioned, the union participation allows them to contribute in saying how this could hurt their membership and their pensioners and et cetera. So the other thing that you mentioned too was the 232 that the United States is undergoing. And we were in Washington with the industry committee not too long ago, and it was an opportunity for us to, highlight and remind them that we have the longest unprotected border in the world, and we have a shared, defense in NORAD. So it's one of those things that I know is worrisome because of the opportunity for them to use sort of backdoor on steel. But we also have trade balance, both in dollars and in tonnage, and the supply chain for the auto sector, for the products that we use in making steel here is follow through. So I commend you on pointing that out, because it is important. It's actually, in my opinion, a place where North American free trade agreement works quite well. So going on to some of the changes that we made, you mentioned, I'm going to ask you the question, does it bring us closer and more aligned with the United States as it relates to what they're doing with trade?
It absolutely does. So we're, as you mentioned, we're in an integrated market with Canada, US, and Mexico. Whether we produce automobiles or energy pipes or construction goods, there is no border from a commercial perspective. We all make things together. So in that regard, when we get unfair trade in Canada, the U.S. suffers because they ship 6 million tons of steel to Canada. When the U.S. has unfair trade, we suffer because we ship 6 million tons to the United States. So we all have to build up our defenses in alignment. Otherwise, we all suffer. And that's why in my remarks I mentioned that that Canada now putting in the trade remedies modernization that we have done here or proposed in the bill, that has sent a really big signal to the U.S. that we are there also in terms of looking at it as a NAFTA perimeter to protect from unfair trade and protect our integrated supply chains and economic activities. So
we'll have to cut the discussion there, Ms. Shanahan. We can hold it to 3 or 4 minutes. And Mr. Dussault, one quick question.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Chair. And thank you very much to everyone, all the witnesses that are here with us today. It's my first time on the Finance Committee. I have the pleasure, though, of sitting on our Government Operations Committee as well as our Public Accounts. And I can say with great certainty that if we don't pay now, we will pay later. And that's what really brings me to the Canada Infrastructure Bank. It's something that I have been looking forward to hearing about. And I just wanted to validate and clarify maybe a few things from my understanding. As I say, it's the first time I'm on the Finance Committee, but I had a chance to look at the infrastructure provisions, the Canada Infrastructure provisions that we put forward, and the $35 billion that the government intends to put into the infrastructure bank are in fact $15 billion from the already announced infrastructure investments that we're making in public transit, green infrastructure, and social infrastructure, and the other $20 billion for assets. And I think that's important to underline, because that's something that's important, I think, to Canadians to know, that we're not just spending money out like that. It really is an investment in infrastructure that will not only serve Canadians on a day-to-day basis, but also Canadians will be part owners of these infrastructure projects. So just getting back to the cost of capital and why it's so important to have this financing option available for the infrastructure needs that we have. Really the difference when we're looking at investing, it's so important to have the proper allocation, isn't it? And all of you are financial people, so you know what I'm talking about, where you're talking about cash, you're talking about for security, you're talking about fixed income, to have that regular payment stream coming in, and then of course equity to take take advantage of growth situations. And with the size of pension funds and the importance of the demographics that we have now, we're more, the demographic pyramid now is inverse, the importance of shifting and having that steady stream of pension income coming in to meet pension payments. I'd like to hear a little bit from Mr. Hindry, your thoughts on that, and also from Mr. Kingston.
Well, two quick comments, ma'am. Whether it be here in Canada or in the United States, federal investments in infrastructure will continue through the federal budgetary process. The projects that I'm mostly alluding to are what's called revenue-generating projects that are the purview of our governors and our mayors, our large municipalities. These are the ones that we've been ignoring. It's the bridge in New York. It's the thruway in Pennsylvania. And but our federal government will continue to make investments on federally owned infrastructure. They will not, that they don't come to the bank for those.
If I can clarify, we are talking about public use infrastructure.
Public use infrastructure,
private, yeah.
but again, not the federal portion and not the DOD portion. What I find gratifying about your comments about your own fiduciaries, your own pensioners, is there has been criticism of people who are not in these plans that these plans are overly beneficial. We have found in discussions with the fiduciaries in the United States that they would find it gratifying to be able to say to the states that the money they have accumulated on behalf of their pensioners was going back into the states, back into these projects. And as I said to your chair when we first met in D.C., and I was speaking to the National Governors Association, it's not the women and men in this room. You're the deciders. You're not the beneficiaries. It's your provincials' leadership and your city leadership. And I think it's a tremendous advantage to the pension community to be part of the solution. And Mr. Leipert was very correct in saying there's a sharp line between the federal side, whether it be my federal or your federal, and the provincial, state, municipal side.
I thank you for that. Mr. Kingston, just from the, give us from the private sector side, why would the private sector be welcoming this type of infrastructure bank?
Well, the real hope is that this bank will spur on projects that haven't been able to get done already. So projects at the federal, provincial, municipal level have not been able to deliver for whatever the reason may be, so mega projects. And I'd note too that it's not just pensions that would be interested in some of these projects. There's a lot of private capital out there looking for returns. And so if the right project comes to fruition and this model is what delivers it, I think you'll find a lot of interest from private sector investors and pension funds. But I don't want to speculate on what those projects would be, but we know that there are a list of mega projects. That
I ask you, have you done analysis around the kind of spin-off economic development that could happen with that kind of public investment in private?
We haven't done the analysis ourselves, but we know from past infrastructure spending that there are massive spin-offs going into the steel industry, employment, into the construction industry. So infrastructure will inevitably be a big boost to the overall economy.
Okay, we'll have to cut it there. To wrap it up, Mr. Dussault, one short question and not too long.
No, very, very short. And actually, it's for Mr. Hendry. Do you know the company BlackRock Investment Company?
I do, sir.
And like you said, you would be worried that Goldman Sachs was behind an infrastructure bank in the U.S. Would you be as worried that BlackRock would have been designing this bank in Canada?
There are two BlackRocks, sir. There's one who seeks very high rates of return, and they do have their own low interest rate fixed income portion of the bank of the institution. As we were speaking a moment ago and earlier to your two colleagues further down, the only thing that matters to me is size, impartiality, and low rate of return on the capital of the institution. Wherever it comes from, if it's in that 2 to 3% range, sir, then I'm comforted.
we'll have to leave it at that. We are slightly over time, cutting into the next panel. Thank all the witnesses for your presentations and for your answers. We will suspend for 2 minutes while the next panel comes forward. Thank you. Meeting suspended. To come to the table. I'm worried and some people having to catch flights. Okay, thank you all for coming. As you know, we're dealing with the Budget Implementation Act, Bill C-44, and we will go to presentations from 5 groups during this round. If you can hold your presentations as close to 5 minutes as possible, that would be helpful. And we'll start with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Brackle, Senior Director, Economic, Financial and Tax Policy. Welcome, Mr. Brackle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, honourable members. Thanks so much for having us. It's an honour and a pleasure to be with you today. We really appreciate the opportunity to provide input because the federal budget is of vital importance to our network of 200,000 businesses across Canada. We just want to make a couple of quick points. Firstly, we're concerned about the competitiveness of Canada. We've had 9 consecutive quarters of falling business investment. We've had 2 years of zero export growth. Back in 2015, we could have attributed the weak business investment to declining natural resource prices, but in recent quarters, we've seen weakness spreading into a variety of investment sectors: machinery and equipment, software, R&D. Now, it may be that the renegotiation of NAFTA is having a chilling effect, but we think it's absolutely critical to improve Canada's competitiveness and bring down the cost of doing business in Canada. Our members tell us all the time, Canada is a great place to do business, but it's an expensive place. Wages are high, taxes are rising, provincial corporate taxes, CPP contributions, carbon levies, EI stuck at high levels. And at the same time, many countries are lowering corporate tax rates, including Japan, Spain, Israel, Norway, Italy, the UK, and most importantly, the United States. Our competitiveness challenges will become acute if and when the U.S. is able to lower corporate income taxes, and this will impede our ability to attract and retain foreign investment. Urgent action is needed. So at the Canadian Chamber, we've tried to develop recommendations that would make a difference. A patent box regime would certainly be a game changer. By creating a 5% tax rate on profits derived from patents developed in Canada, that would be a huge incentive for companies to develop and commercialize innovative technology here. We would also ask you to increase the 100% write-off of business investment in the first year. That would be a big boost for Canadian investment. Now, on infrastructure, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce is supportive of the government's efforts to address Canada's infrastructure deficit. But it's crucial that we are strategic. The commitment of $60 billion in new funding for green, social, transit investments over the next decade is certainly needed. But in our view, the federal plan lacks some balance. The trade-enabling infrastructure, the stuff that enables the movement of products, services, and people through Canada and to markets around the world, represents around 12% of the new plan.
Get you to slow down a little bit.
Sorry.
I think our
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
translators
Sorry
are
about
starting to work up a sweat back there.
Thank you. With 60% of Canada's GDP tied to trade, this category of infrastructure can improve our productivity, our long-term global competitiveness, and our economic well-being. And as Canada's trade infrastructure is showing signs of strain, our competitors are aggressively investing in improvements to trade infrastructure. So we've been urging that trade-enabling infrastructure, these roads and ports and airports, be made an equal priority alongside the green, social, and transit infrastructure. Now, we're also optimistic about the Canada Infrastructure Bank. In our view, one of the biggest potential benefit of the bank could be its intelligence function. If the new institution is able to take a national view on identifying Canada's long-term infrastructure challenges, our choke points and gaps, and create the export corridors in a strategic manner, then it could be very valuable in the long run. We also think it could be a big win if the bank can help speed up the time it takes to get major projects moving and to pull more private sector funding into these projects. Let's take a real example. Via Rail has an interesting proposal to create a dedicated passenger service along the Ottawa-Toronto-Montreal corridor. Now, we're not talking about high-speed rail, we're just talking about normal speed rail. I mean, right now, trains can travel a maximum 50 miles per hour because they're sharing those tracks with cargo trains. So a dedicated passenger rail would enable them to basically double the speed. So you'd get from here to Toronto in about 2.5 hours. Now, this is big bucks, about 3 or 4 billion. So we think that's something that the infrastructure bank could leverage or could provide guarantees to attract private sector investment into that, so it's not our tax dollars. I'll stop here with one additional point which the Chamber will continue to make. If the government wants to make it easier for the private sector to invest in infrastructure, we also have to reduce regulation. And it's not just pipelines. Regulatory uncertainty and delays of privately funded infrastructure projects is a problem that still needs to be addressed when it comes to attracting investment capital to Canada. Efforts to reduce federal-provincial duplication or to have environmental reviews completed in a defined time period would be hugely appreciated. We could also maybe fast-track approval processes for certain types of green energy investments. So thank you so much for listening. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Brackle. Turning to the Canadian Federation of Students, and I'm not sure whether I'm going to get your name right. Is it Miss Art?
Art, yeah.
Okay. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So good afternoon, members of the committee, and thank you so much for having me here on behalf of the Canadian Federation of Students. With the release of Budget 2017 on March 22nd, students welcomed investments for Indigenous learners and part-time students. However, we felt that the budget lacked an innovative vision for higher education overall, and I'm going to take you through that right now. First, on the issue of funding for Indigenous learners, the 2017 federal budget promised $90 million in funding over 2 years for the post-secondary student support program. This program is a federal initiative that distributes non-repayable financial support to Indigenous students attending post-secondary education. While this commitment still fell short of the government's 2015 election promise of injecting the program with $50 million in funding annually, the injection of funds was nevertheless welcomed by students and will permit an additional estimated 4,600 Indigenous students to obtain funding for post-secondary education. However, while removing the 2% annual funding cap on the post-secondary student support program and injecting $90 million in new funds over 2 years,
You to slow down a little too.
Sure. Yeah. The program continues to fail to provide full, zero-cost access to post-secondary to all Indigenous learners, a treaty right guaranteed in several foundational nation-to-nation treaties and reaffirmed as a constitutional right in the Canadian Constitution Act of 1982. In order to address the backlog in applicants to the post-secondary student support program, whose funding has been capped for 2 decades, the government would need to invest an additional $428.8 million over 3 years, or an investment of $141 million per year. And additionally, eligibility for the program continues to exclude Métis students, something the Federation would like to see changed. Secondly, I wish to speak on the expansion of eligibility to the Canada Student Grants Program. So a second area of progress made in Budget 2017 was with respect to the Canada Student Grants Program, which will now include part-time students and those with dependent children beginning in 2018-2019. We estimate that the investment of $167.2 million over 4 years will make an additional 10,000 part-time students and an additional 13,000 students with children eligible for these grants as of 2018. Now, once again, while this reform is definitely a step in the right direction, we believe the Canada Student Grants Program eligibility should also be expanded to include graduate students. Further, the federal government should take this one step further and eliminate interest rates on student loans through the Canada Student Loans Program, while providing 2-stage assistance for all Canada Student Loan Program borrowers 5 years after graduation. In the last academic year alone, we know the federal government profited over $580 million in interest off of public student loans affecting the most vulnerable, impoverished groups in Canada. We believe this government must end this practice. Thirdly, on the investments in cooperative and work-integrated learning programs, we also saw that Budget 2017 committed investments in cooperative education and work-integrated learning. These investments were welcomed by students. However, we feel that the government's focus on programs in the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields alone demonstrates a narrow understanding of innovation and leaves many students behind. Additionally, we were pleased to see progress in our fight to end unpaid internships in Budget 2017. However, we will continue advocating until all unpaid internships are eliminated, including those that are part of a formal educational program.
Jane, slow down a little bit. They're shaking their heads back there.
Okay.
Don't worry about the time. We'll give you the time.
Okay, thank you. Students hope that this will set an example for other youth employers, as there continues to be an estimated 300,000 people working unpaid internships every year in Canada. Fourthly, on investments to Canada's research capacity, Budget 2017 saw investments to establish new research chairs and the establishment of a Chief Science Advisory, among other welcomed initiatives. However, Budget 2017 missed an opportunity to restore and invest in basic fundamental research and include bold reinvestments in the Tri-Council agencies, allowing the granting councils to adequately support the research endeavors of graduate students and researchers across all disciplines. And so finally, despite some improvements made in the area of Indigenous access to education through funding for the Post-Secondary Student Support Program, expanded eligibility for the Canada Student Grants Program, and investments in cooperative and work-integrated learning programs, students contend that Budget 2017 and its subsequent implementation fails to address the crisis of post-secondary education funding in Canada. Canada's post-secondary education sector is financed increasingly through student debt, part of a larger trend of household debt leveraging our economy as a whole. In 2015, household debt exceeded the size of the Canadian economy at $1.6 trillion, or 171% of household disposable income. Between 1999 and 2012, student loan debt alone rose by 140%, a product of systemic underfunding and underprioritization of federal and provincial governments. Budget 2017 fails to comprehensively address mounting student debt, which has collectively reached over $28 billion. The Canadian Federation of Students has proposed a bold plan for Canada's post-secondary sector through our budget submission that can be realized through clear budget prioritization of post-secondary education. This plan proposes the elimination of all tuition fees in favor of public funding, and we advocate for this funding to be governed by a federal act modeled after the Canada Health Act, recognizing the lack of clear federal role in post-secondary education in our country. This investment in our country's future would yield billions in return through direct spending and taxation, advantages in social indicators, and general economic growth. Canadian expenditure on post-secondary currently sits at approximately 2.5% of GDP through a complicated patchwork of programs rather than a more efficient and progressive universal system. We believe these monies can be better allocated to support a tuition-free universal system of access for all. We hope to see this kind of bold direction through the implementation of Budget 2017, where possible, and certainly in Budget 2018. Thank you, committee members, for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Art. Petroleum Services Association of Canada, Ms. Akin.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee members. I'm Elizabeth Akin, Senior Vice President, Petroleum Services Association of Canada, or PSAC. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today and provide you with some comments. I understood you wanted comments on the abolition of the Canadian exploration expense, and so that's where my comments will be. PSAC is the National Trade Association for the service, supply, and manufacturing sectors of the upstream petroleum, oil and gas petroleum industry, representing over 160 companies that employ over 30,000 workers. These are the companies who provide the innovation, technological advancement, and in-the-field experience to Canada's energy explorers and producers, helping to increase efficiency, improve safety, and protect the environment. The oil and gas industry is a significant contributor to Canadian GDP. According to a 2015 Canadian Energy Research Institute report, over the next 25 years, Canada's oil and natural gas development is expected to contribute $7.6 trillion to Canada's GDP. However, with the collapse in commodity prices, capital investment in this sector plummeted from $81 billion in 2014 to $31 billion in 2016, and tens of thousands of workers were laid off. The situation has been exacerbated by the lack of access to tidewater and global markets for our resources. While we appreciate the approval of pipelines and other infrastructure projects such as LNG facilities, it will take years to get them built. I will say at this point, we do appreciate the $30 million one-time payment to the Government of Alberta, which today was translated into $235 million by way of a loan to the Orphan Well Association so that it will be repaid by industry, thereby creating thousands of jobs for workers that are much needed. So thank you for that. The world still needs oil and gas, and Canada has one of the most robust regulatory regimes in the world, along with stringent environmental standards. We are already reducing GHG emissions per barrel of oil produced from the oil sands down 30% from 1990 levels. While Canada is said to be lagging in R&D, the oil and gas sector is the exception. According to the Government of Canada's Science, Technology and Innovation Council report, State of the Nation 2014, over the past 16 years, R&D investment in oil and gas extraction industry rose dramatically, increasing almost 14-fold from 1999 to 2015. 94% of PSAC members report investing in R&D, with 45% planning to increase their budgets over the next 2 years, and 22% are already pursuing clean tech to reduce emissions. If Canada is to play a meaningful role in reducing global emissions while the world still needs oil and gas, Canada should continue to supply those resources. If not, we will be faced with carbon leakage and the green paradox, where nations with far less concern for our environment produce the oil and gas that the world needs, and emissions will rise as a result. Canadians need oil and gas too. Today, we import over 800,000 barrels of foreign oil. If we continue to discourage investment in this industry, we will end up importing more and contributing to greater emissions. Instead, let us continue to innovate and reduce emissions and reduce the carbon, responsibly develop our vast natural resources, and not discard an industry that is vital to our country now and to those parts of the world that will benefit from our expertise, care of the environment, and energy supply to rise out of energy poverty. We disagree that the Canadian exploration expense is a subsidy. Rather, we believe it is an important incentive in attracting capital to higher-risk exploration activity, comparable to R&D spending in other sectors, and a basic part of tax policy intended to incent investment that creates jobs and economic benefits while recognizing the risks involved. We believe that the term fossil fuel subsidy refers more to those countries that provide deep discounts to consumers through low prices for purchase of fuels such as gasoline and kerosene, not to economic incentives to producers of the resource where world markets dictate prices regardless of the cost to develop and produce the resource. With less exploration per se taking place today versus development, abolishing the CEE sends a negative signal to investors that Canada is not supportive of this vital industry. Capital is mobile, and investors can easily choose to invest south of the border where investment is being welcomed among with other places. This would be a loss for all Canadians. So we urge you to reconsider. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ms. Quinn. Vancouver Economic Commission, Mr. Shepherd, Director of Vancouver Film Commission.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm pleased to be here today on behalf of Vancouver Economic Commission and our CEO, Ian MacKay, who sends his direct apologies, but the Prime Minister is in Vancouver today, so he's hosting him for some events, so I'm here on his behalf. The Vancouver Economic Commission is the economic development platform for Vancouver, and as many of you are aware, for several years now, Vancouver has led the nation in GDP growth, in job growth, and as the most diversified economy in Canada. In that context, we're delighted to speak in support of Bill C-44. While most of my comments today will focus on Division 20 of the Invest in Canada Act, I'd like to quickly address some other components of the bill. Regarding Division 5, the creation of a pan-Canadian artificial intelligence strategy, we support this initiative unequivocally, but at the same time, and to be clear and on the record, that Vancouver and British Columbia boast some of the world-class capacity in AI disciplines at the universities of Victoria, UBC, Simon Fraser University, as well as globally recognized cluster of quantum computing companies such as D-Wave and 1Qubit. Vancouver is well positioned to lead the country in groundbreaking innovation in the quantum field, but most importantly, from a national perspective, it's imperative that Canada continue to develop and retain some of the world's best researchers in the field of AI. And a brief comment on Division 8 and increasing the threshold of significance for the review. We support this measure. It is in line with previous practices and is moving in at the rate in line with GDP. And with regard to Division 20, regarding the Investment in Canada Act, the creation of a Canada-wide investment hub comes at a time when Canada's brand is a destination for global capital flows is at an all-time high. Political stability, fiscal strength, globally recognized post-secondary education institutions, and a multicultural population have created a platform for the 21st century innovation that is among the world's best. Canada's ability and capacity to attract a bigger share of foreign direct investment must be a major priority of the Government of Canada, and the investment hub must demonstrate to the international investment community that Canada is a clear, cohesive and comprehensive value proposition to attract further FDI. While Canada's brand will undoubtedly open the door to conversations with investors from all over the world, the federal government's investment hub needs to be structured and resourced in a way that recognises that investment capital lands in cities, regions and communities across the country. And in most cases, it is these local ecosystems and the regional clusters that make the investment possible. In that sense, Canada currently has 13 mini investment hubs, the Big City Economic Agencies Alliance, and I know you've just heard recently from Mark Dench, the president. But Vancouver, through our CEO, who is the current chair of the CCCA, works closely with the Trade Commissioner Service at the Global Affairs Canada to brand Canada to international investors through our city-based platforms. It's a great partnership and a model that needs to be expanded and improved in the new investment hub. In my own personal experience, I've recently relocated from London to Vancouver to take on the role as its inaugural film commissioner. And from that perspective, we are seeing how Canada's global brand value, equally weighted by Vancouver as a destination, is experiencing high levels of investment attraction from across the globe in the digital entertainment and technology sectors, both in big infrastructure projects and investment into companies. VEC, through our daily work, is witnessing some of the same factors across all the main economic sectors that are a strategic focus for the city. So the ongoing work of the City Economic Development Agencies are delivering daily on what will surely be some of the key targets and outcomes for the investment hub, and from that respect will be a valuable strategic partner for the success of this initiative. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much, David. And turning to the Canadian Labour Congress, Ms. McEwen, Senior Economist, you get to be the one to wrap it up.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to appear before you today. The Canadian Labour Congress is Canada's largest labour central, bringing together Canada's national and international unions, along with provincial and territorial federations of labour and 130 district labour councils. We represent 3.3 million Canadians who work in virtually all sectors of the Canadian economy, in all occupations and in all parts of Canada. The 300-page Budget Implementation Act, or Bill C-44, which was introduced on April 11th, implements a variety of commitments contained in Budget 2017. There are too many relevant to workers in Canada for me to comment on them all. I want to briefly highlight a few concerns. Bill C-44 strengthens the Special Import Measures Act in several areas that Canadian steel producers and unions had urged. But disappointingly, no mention is made of improving the standing of trade unions and establishing their right to bring trade complaints, which was promised in the text of Budget 2017. Division 11 deals with amendments to the Employment Insurance Act and the Canada Labour Code maternity and parental leave and benefit changes announced in Budget 2017. We have argued consistently that the best way of expanding real options for working families and women in particular is for the federal government to commit to long-term, stable funding for universal, affordable, high-quality childcare across Canada. I want to emphasize that the changes to EI parental benefits that are proposed in this bill are no substitute for concerted action to address the childcare crisis in Canada. Division 18 of Part 4 enacts the Canada Infrastructure Bank Act, which establishes the Canada Infrastructure Bank as a Crown corporation. The bank's purpose is to invest in and seek to attract private sector and institutional investment to revenue-generating infrastructure projects. In our pre-budget submission, we suggested that the federal government could accomplish this in several ways. Government could issue green bonds in order to fund projects such as the electrification of transportation, electric vehicle charging stations and networks, smart grid technology and transmission lines for renewable energy, and renewable energy storage. The government could also facilitate and fund innovative financing arrangements to ensure that financial institutions and utilities guarantee loans to municipal governments for property tax-based and utility-based on-bill financing for retrofits. The government could also develop a plan to re-establish postal banking through the Canada Post Corporation and use this to finance green investments and spread local renewable energy generation in Canadian homes and small communities. Or the federal government could simply take advantage of its ability to borrow at remarkably low rates in order to provide low-cost access to capital for public infrastructure projects. As many observers have pointed out, the case for the infrastructure bank, as it is described in Budget 2017 and in this budget implementation bill, is not compelling. Yields on a 30-year Government of Canada bond currently sits around 2%, which means Ottawa can borrow at much lower rates than is available in the private sector. We agree there's a need for improved financing tools, but there is no case for the CIB, which is simply a vehicle for massive and costly privatization. There is further concern that the stated needs of pension funds for returns in the 7 to 9% range will mean increased user fees, which would be untenable for already expensive transit operations in most large urban centres. Finally, infrastructure investment that is driven by the need for high returns will put socially useful investments in environmental infrastructure or affordable housing on the back burner for cash-strapped municipalities. As CUPE economist Toby Sanger phrases it, no homeowner in their right mind would commit to a mortgage at a rate of 7% or more when they can borrow at 2.5%, especially when it involves locking in at over 10, 20, or 30 years and end up paying close to twice as much in costs. So why would the federal government make the Canada Infrastructure Bank rely only on higher cost private finance to fund what will put the public sector holding the risk if it fails or if the right projects don't get funded? So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Angela. With that, then, we will go to questions. We will go to 5-minute rounds in order to hold it pretty tight, starting with Mr. Fergus.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for coming. It was a broad range of views which we're hearing today, and I was glad to hear it. Some of the comments were, of course, focused on what was in the Budget Implementation Act, and some was on what was missing from the Budget Implementation Act. You'll forgive me to focus on the former rather than the latter, just so that it can help us in our process of eventually going through this Implementation Act clause by clause later on in this process, if we ever get there, Mr. Chair. I guess my first question would be to Mr. Shepherd. I'm quite familiar with the work of I've met with your CEO, who brought to my attention the importance of trying to direct the Government of Canada's attention towards great and innovative projects such as D-Wave, such as General Fusion. How do you see then the aspects of the Invest in Canada provisions of the budget that could lead toward attracting more investment into, frankly, what could be world-changing technological innovation?
I think for companies like those, they're at the cutting edge of the technology of which they're developing and kind of creating in a way. I think the investment attraction kind of part of it and having a Canada-wide focus on how to attract those international investors is quite important, because we're obviously globally competing for that kind of attention. I think it is that combination of how organizations like ours can work on the ground with those innovative companies, but bring them into a national and a global kind of context, along with the provisions and kind of outcomes of something like the investment hub would kind of do. I think it would just raise the game on certainly the companies that we work with every day, and kind of would then be celebrating kind of Canada's innovative economy and kind of showing us to be really at the cutting edge of some of these amazing technologies that kind of are being created in kind of small companies right across the country, in which we have many in Vancouver.
So, just going further in terms of creating these strategic hubs, or innovation hubs, do you have any concerns about whether or not, specifically for your neck of the woods, would Vancouver be the innovation hub for for energy, or would you be part of the ecosystem as we know that Calgary is certainly an energy leader, but we've also seen Toronto being headquarters to many energy companies. How do you see Vancouver placing itself within that ecosystem?
That would almost certainly be sort of more of a question to some of my colleagues that work on some of the other areas around green technology, for instance, and on some of those really exciting kind of elements that are coming through. But I think Vancouver has got some distinct qualities in various sectors that we would want to see be sharing the limelight on some of those innovation hubs, and an appropriate kind of recognition of the talent and the kind of the cluster of those companies that we have in the province, really. So I think it's being able to kind of make sure that those companies, that kind of cluster of different industries, are well recognized, whatever the plans would be for those innovation hubs, and make sure that we can put the best case forward to have an appropriate level of investment and attention kind of come to Vancouver and BC.
Ms. Art, thank you very much for your presentation as well, and I certainly understand, appreciate the support for some of the moves that we've made in regard to Aboriginal education, in regards to the Canada Student Grant, in regards to work integrated learning and cooperatives. I wonder if, I hear your point very clearly on terms of perhaps that you feel that the emphasis is too much on STEM as opposed to STEAM, adding arts into that number. I'd like to give you an opportunity to continue your thoughts a little further on that.
Sure. Thank you for that question. From our perspective, it's incredibly important that we have a system of post-secondary education that is encouraging young people who are interested and passionate about any number of different areas, professions that could be of importance in our society, that they be given equal opportunity to be able to access those. And I think that when we talk about the dangers of particularly focusing on STEM or individual career paths, what we do see is a lot of young people who, even over the past 25 years in my generation, who have been in many ways misled into thinking that there would be a guaranteed job for them in a particular sector, whether that's students who were encouraged to go into teaching in Ontario, who then saw the lack of teaching opportunities after there was sort of a surplus of students that were graduating from the Ontario's teacher colleges, or whether it was young people who decided to focus on work within or developing a career within the resource extraction industry, who today aren't finding jobs in those fields. And so we believe that the key to actually building an economic, sustainable system across our country that actually encourages young people to be trained in a variety of different professions is going to ensure that we have people who are graduating not only in those STEM fields, but people who are also graduating in fields that we know that we need in our society today, but may not necessarily be the ones where all of the supports, the public funds for supports may be today. Having the opportunity for anyone to be able to think about expanding their horizons by what they're passionate about will help us ensure that we have young people who are graduating from a variety of sectors, and provides us with the diversity that we need in our societies. I think in the same ways that we need people that are graduating from those STEM fields, we also need people who are graduating in architecture, who are graduating in a number of different fields. And I think that it's a bit short-sighted to pigeonhole young people and their futures into one particular job sector if those jobs disappear in the next 20 to 25 years.
Okay, we'll have to cut you there. Mr. Leipert.
Thank you. Elizabeth, thank you for your presentation on behalf of the industry in Alberta, the industry that, quite frankly, has driven this country's economy for the last decade. I'm glad you mentioned the clarification around the ridiculous assertion of fossil fuel subsidies. And I was pleased that the parliamentary secretary and her staff were here to hear that, because maybe they'll take note and change their ridiculous notes that she reads from in question period on a regular basis, because there is a huge difference between incentives and subsidies. And so I think what is important here is to point out that this is an industry that drove this economy, that continues to be a major part of this economy, where if we don't get rigs back in the field, we don't get people back working again, those 100 people that used to be on our chairs, planes coming out of Prince Edward Island that aren't coming anymore, those jobs aren't going to be there. So we've got now in this budget a recommendation to start to reduce those tax incentives, and I think it's important that you outline a little bit more if the government goes ahead with that initiative, what it's going to do to the drilling industry in Alberta.
Yes, thank you for the question. Well, it's I think hard to predict exactly what the impacts will be. Clearly, commodity prices have an impact. However, I think that we are finding that Canada is overall less competitive these days. We have such a number of policies that are impacting our competitiveness. And it's not anything taken singularly. However, it's the cumulative effects of all of these things. When investors decide where to invest their capital, they do look at all of the aspects, you know, whether it's carbon levies, methane emissions reductions, and now if they are looking at the Canadian exploration expense, it's just one more option that's off the table for them when they're looking where to invest their money. And I think it speaks to Canada not being as open and to this industry as other countries. And certainly as we look to the administration south of the border, they are certainly doing everything they can to welcome and encourage activity down there. As you know and have mentioned, the industry has been through devastating times. Tens of thousands of people lost their jobs. And yes, in Alberta alone in 2014, we had over 100,000 non-resident workers. They have all gone back to their home provinces. And so we need to build that investment climate back up again and continue to have a competitive environment to attract that capital. And it's proving difficult. So there is risk involved in exploration, and taking away this incentive that will help them decide to invest that capital is an important aspect of what we can do. As I said, I don't believe it's a subsidy in the normal sense. This isn't affecting the prices that they get or achieve for their products. It speaks to the risk. And you know, they go on. This will mostly affect the small explorers and producers that often are those in these days, the ones that go out and do exploratory wells, that then go on and pass those fields on to larger producers and encourage more development drilling.
Well, and let's be upfront about it. That tax, the only benefit is when you actually pay taxes, or that you so. This is not like Bombardier, where we threw them 308 times the money. That $50 million is nice from the federal government for the well cleanup program, but it's 1/8 of what we gave that for an industry. 1/8 of what we gave to one company in Quebec. Now that's a subsidy, and so I think I'd like you to outline a little bit more on the potential that we could have in Alberta for not only job creation but environmental cleanup, because 50 million and 250 is a nice number and it'll get a lot of people back to work, but it will only make a dent in a situation that needs action.
Ms. Akin, I think the money to Bombardier that was a loan, not a subsidy.
We'll see we'll see if it ever gets paid back, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Akin, go ahead.
I think that the benefit of having the exploration credit, the CEE and the CDE, is the fact that this goes to an industry. So private companies are spending money in order to claim this, as you say. They are putting people to work and creating economic benefits. And those benefits go far beyond those direct jobs in the companies themselves. When these companies explore for oil and gas that's ultimately developed, they are paying royalties and corporate taxes. People are paying the income taxes. And the economic benefits are spread across the province and the country in terms of all the rural communities where this activity takes place, because then they're giving business to the coffee shops and the motels and the car leasing places. In fact, we have done studies on the oil and gas services sector, which is above and beyond just the E&P companies themselves. And in fact, our recent study has shown that in 2013, the oil and gas services sector alone contributed $119 billion to Canadian GDP. That is beyond just, that's to show the reach and scope of this industry throughout the economy. I think when you've seen the downturn over these last years and you wondered why it's maybe affected manufacturers in Ontario and Quebec, and that's partly because of the energy industry, because so many services and industries in this country contribute to the oil and gas industry, whether it's even investment banks in Bay Street, for example, and lawyers. So, I mean, it affects everybody. So having these incentives, it bodes well for all Canadians, really, to have this.
Thank you both. Mr. Dussault.
Merci.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I'd like to begin with a clarification from Ms. Art. You said $528 million that is paid by students in interest to the federal government, 580. And that goes back into the government's coffers. It comes out of the pockets of students.
Pensez-vous qu'on devrait adresser cette situation et
Don't you think that situation should be corrected? And the government, more or less, or maybe it was the Liberal Party that promised it would pay the interest on student loans. Do you think that this is some element that is missing from C-44 and that should be addressed later on in our deliberations?
In the work that the federal budget does, we believe that it falls short of presenting a bold vision for post-secondary, and from the perspective of the Canadian Federation of Students, that will always be the complete elimination of tuition fees and the funding of a totally universal system of post-secondary education. We do think that it is quite disappointing to see that the federal government is profiting over $580 million in interest rates alone off of public student debt. And I want to remind committee members that the people that are taking on these loans are poor communities, are impoverished communities, are vulnerable communities in our society. They are the ones that are relying on the Canada Student Loans Program and its provincial equivalents. And so the fact that the federal government is making so much money off of the backs of poor Canadians and their families is quite disappointing to see. There are a number of provinces that have completely eliminated interest rates on provincial student loans. Most recently, that happened in my own home province in Manitoba. And we've seen this as an example growing in different provinces, for example, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland and Labrador, and there are a few others. And so we definitely believe that we need a bold vision for free education in this country, but at the very least, I think that this government can commit to eliminating interest rates on provincial and public student loans.
Merci. Juste pour continuer.
Thank you. Just to continue with the clarification, for Aboriginal peoples, in programs for student aid. Can you give me a figure? Can you evaluate the number of persons who were eligible further to the changes? I don't know. I didn't think I heard a number. Yes, we do have a number.
In addition, that will be included. This doesn't fill the backlog that we believe includes over 10,000 Indigenous students, and this is a figure that has been released by the Assembly of First Nations, which is a group that we've worked with, and so they estimate the backlog to be much higher than that, but we are excited to see that with that $90 million commitment, at the very least, it will change the lives of 4,600 Indigenous students in this country, and that is significant.
From Ms. McEwen on parental leave. We've heard several people speak to us about that. According to you, is this progress to go from a choice of 12 months at 55% or 18 months at 38%? Maybe you could comment on that, and also on the fact that once the decision is made and $1 is received, it is an irrevocable decision. And do you think that matter should be addressed when we get into the clause-by-clause study of the bill?
The Government of Canada did consultations around the parental leave changes. There was a wide group, including the CFIB, the Chamber of Commerce, the health groups, who all told them that this was not a change that would help families, that this was not a change that would make it easier for businesses to have their employees go on leave. We presented other changes that would be better, such as adding specific leave for the father, making EI more accessible, those types of things. 55% of your pay is already a barrier for low-income families to take the whole year. So they're not going to have access to the 33%. That's simply not enough to live on if you're a low-income family. And the family low-income supplement has not increased since it was introduced. It's completely phased out at a family income of $25,000 a year. So I would recommend that you look at the low-income family supplement on EI, as well as other options for improving maternity and parental leave, specifically QPIP. If we wanted to make the program more accessible and work better for families, we'd look at what's happened in Quebec. And childcare is a necessary component of that as well. That's very often what was driving the complaints. Parents would say, but we can't find childcare for one-year-olds, which then leads us to the case where you can't modify it. So if you can find childcare at 14 months and your employer can give you leave for 14 months, that doesn't give you the flexibility to be able to go back at 14 months. You have to choose either a year or a year and a half. So that doesn't offer a huge amount of flexibility for workers or families. So we think there's a lot to be, this is not a good modification, it just isn't.
Okay, thank you both. We have time for, we'll take Ms. O'Connell and Mr. Albuteyev, and that will be it. Ms. O'Connell.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here. I apologize that we won't have time to ask questions for everybody, but I want to start with my question for Mr. Shepherd. In terms of the Invest in Canada Hub and then organizations such as yours or what you're part of, when I was in municipal government before, even local municipalities certainly wanted to attract that investment, and I always found it was very difficult to quantify whether there was a good return on that investment, because you might have these trade missions or communications, but it was very hard to determine whether or not any of those leads really translated into anything, especially when clusters were formed for not just one small municipality, but where I come from, for example, in the Greater Toronto area. And, you know, how do you translate whether or not it was through that hub or that cluster that attracted the business? And I think you pointed out in your testimony some ways that the Invest in Canada Hub needs to work with these local organizations to ensure that these needs are kind of being met. If I misunderstood your testimony, or could you maybe comment on how you would like to see this type of hub then work with the needs of the local commissions, et cetera?
Sure. The kind of the thread that we was trying to kind of put across is the fact that the Invest in Canada Hub initiative is a good thing. But it's exactly right. We should be working with the existing economic development agencies and kind of structures that are already in place that are trying to do the best that they can do around building those clusters in the local economies, and kind of maximizing on the talent that has kind of chosen to be in those specific areas, either because of it is the kind of outputs from educational establishments, or it's a natural hub. Like for us in Vancouver, it's a massively growing technology hub, sort of in green technology and kind of in the wider technology sphere. So I think the kind of key message was that, you know, we are trying to do this work on a daily basis, and we would welcome working with the kind of, you know, a federal kind of initiative, but focusing on how that federal initiative can help us do our jobs better and kind of get more kind of impact from it.
Perfect, thank you. Ms. Art, I just actually, your conversation with Mr. Fergus raised some questions that I had. So it wasn't directly as part of your earlier testimony, but in terms of, you raised issues about students finding jobs and the types of sectors and the types of opportunities. And it's interesting because when we did pre-budget consultations, a very constant theme that always came up was the lack of access of information or the information, workforce information being in silos. And I wonder if in a group like yourself, in terms of the Federation of Students, if students don't start putting pressure on universities to start better understanding workforce numbers. You raised the issue of teachers in Ontario. I was graduating high school at a time when everybody went into, teachers college, but that was because there was a shortage. It's just that more people went into it than were probably needed. In the GTA, we're going to have a shortage of skilled labor. How do we ensure that institutions, whether it's, through governments and then post-secondary education, are kind of giving that information to students so that they can plan properly depending on what field they want to go into?
Thank you for the question. I think that there are a number of different tensions that are raised in that, and I think the number one thing that you've sort of pointed out is that a lot of young people today are finding themselves in a very competitive job market, and in a job market that provides a lot of precarious options for them as young people and as new graduates. I think that for a lot of post-secondary institutions today, there are actually quite a few problematic private partnerships that are taking on the role of guiding our institutions in the type of options that are being provided to even students who are working on different research projects on campus, for example, that partner with the private industry or the private sector. Those are often sort of precarious situations of employment for young people as well, but beyond that, it sort of pushes them into a specific type of field because of those public-private partnerships. I think that there is a huge role for the federal government to play when addressing the underfunding of the post-secondary education sector to ensure that our public institutions are actually accountable to the public. In Ontario, our Board of Regents, or the institutions that actually govern financially the direction of the universities and colleges, are almost overrun by private sector representatives. And a lot of that is reflective of the fact that most of the funding that comes from our post-secondary institutions is now either tuition fee-based or private sector-based. Public funding is under 50% in the province of Ontario. And so that's a very worrying trend, and I think the number one intervention the federal government can make is to ensure that public funding remains the main funder for our post-secondary sector, and I think with that would follow an opportunity for our post-secondary sectors to truly be responsible to the public.
Thank you. Do I have time?
No, you are over time. Mr. El-Boutaif.
Well, thank you very much for coming in front of the committee today. And I go for Mr. Brakel and Ms. Aquin. And my questions are, I kind of establish a reality check of the status quo, the economic situation that we have from declining in investment, high taxes, high payroll taxes, carbon tax, policies that really turn off the investment from coming our way, a huge decline from $81 billion to $31 billion investment in the oil sector alone, ban of tankers lying on the west coast while they're allowed with the Saudi oil and other oils on the Atlantic provinces for the chairs riding. It's LNG, what's happening south of the borders. I mean, the picture or the episode, as we see, is very, very concerning from a business perspective, from the economic perspective, and how we're going and moving forward. It seems like we're doing the right thing, the wrong thing at the wrong time. Can you elaborate on that? I think, my opinion, from our policies, our approach, our economic, and with the surrounding situation around us, seems like this government is doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. So I would like to hear from Mr. Brakel and Ms. Aquin.
No, thank you very much for your question. I think that's absolutely critical. I mean, the defining variable at how our economic well-being will be our ability to export and sell into the global economy. I mean, our domestic economy has been weakening. We've got Canadians continue to borrow and spend, and that has sustained our GDP growth. But when you see exports basically flat for 2 years in a row, declining business investment basically 2 years. What we want to do is create a more dynamic, more exciting business climate and attract more foreign direct investment. And one of the things that we hear from multinational companies is that they're really, the Canadian groups will have to pitch to their headquarters and say, this is why you have to allocate additional $1 billion to Canada. And then the next is the group from Mexico, and then the next is the group from Europe. And so it's a very competitive dynamic. And so that's why we really want to focus on the cost of doing business in Canada and make sure that we're competitive.
Thank you for the question. I think from the oil and natural gas industry's perspective, it seems that we haven't had a proper national dialogue on the direction that we want to go in this country. As I have said, and as Mr. Leipert has said, that this has been the economic engine of the country for many years. A huge portion of our GDP, huge contributor to jobs, our standard of living, well-being in the country. And because of the discussion around climate change, we are wanting to, I think oil and gas development appears to be being discouraged. And therefore, capital investment is being pushed away. I think that, as I mentioned, we develop our resources so responsibly compared to the rest of the world. We care so much about the environment that it doesn't make sense for us not to produce our resources and sell them while the world needs this. Our biggest customer, 95% of our resources go to the U.S., has become our biggest competitor. And so they are taking less and less of our product all the time. And we are selling it to them at a discount. We are buying it back from them in Eastern Canada at full price. It doesn't make sense for Canadians. We are losing jobs and royalties and many economic benefits because of this. And our industry does a great job of technology and innovation. As I mentioned, we are leaders in that. The Canadian oilfield services sector is renowned around the world for its technology and innovation and expertise. And I think it's a shame if we discourage that and not take advantage of it. Our members are pursuing clean tech. They are incorporating renewables into their service offerings, even within the oil and gas industry. So I think if carbon is the problem, then we should address the carbon issue and try to lower that, rather than the proverbial throw the baby out with the bathwater. And because I think that by taking advantage of our natural resources, then we can take those revenues and use those to develop technologies to reduce emissions and move to renewables. At this point, I think we agree that we need all sources of energy to meet growing global demand. And so we aren't saying that this is the only one, but we are saying while we need it, we should develop ours because we do it so well. I think you will find that many of the E&P companies and the transmission companies, the pipeline companies, are already investing in renewables, whether that's wind and solar and so forth. So if we discourage investment, we are just hindering their ability to pursue those goals. So I think it benefits us all to remain competitive, and I see that we are eroding our competitiveness by certain actions that we're taking.
We will have to cut it there. We are beyond time. I just why can you explain why the Canadian oil discount price exists? I mean, there's a discount price in Canada. Can you explain that? And what difference would the Energy East pipeline make? I mean, I come from Eastern Canada. That's where your 800,000 barrels comes into from foreign sources. How would that improve investment in the oil and gas sector?
Yes, thank you. The discount is because we only have one customer, and so we are selling to the U.S. The U.S. can sell they can ship their products offshore and so can get world market prices for that. If we had Energy East, in fact, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I mean, I think that Keystone is just perpetuating the discount because it's still going through the same customer. However, it does achieve debottlenecking our products. I mean, there's a point where in the next few years, where we just won't have the means to get our product to market unless we rely more and more on rail, and we know that that's not the safest route. In terms of Energy East, it's because right now we are buying back that product from the U.S., from Venezuela, from Saudi Arabia, from world markets. In fact, not only are we paying full price for it there by doing that, I think we're creating more emissions because of the transportation of those fuels from those other countries on tankers and so forth, and displacing Canadian jobs. So again, if we had Energy East, we would be able to sell to Europe and countries there. On the West Coast, the moratorium isn't helping because that would give us access to more of the Asian markets. So each access would present different markets and allow us to get world prices so that we're not totally dependent on the U.S.
Okay, with that, you are the last group of witnesses, and we certainly want to thank you for your appearance. Before we adjourn, I do, as chair and on behalf of all members, want to thank all those who assisted the committee in getting to this point. We have 3 more divisions with public servants to finish. Amendments had to be in by May 25th at 5 o'clock. I especially want to thank the Library of Parliament analysts for providing us with a 65-page briefing document on a 300-page budget bill. Certainly not omnibus, we know that. 300-page Budget Implementation Act, and also want to thank the clerk and the assistant clerk for the difficult job of scheduling witnesses and rescheduling witnesses and rescheduling us. And the translators as well in the booth, who have sometimes had a hard time keeping up with some witnesses, Miss Art. And in any event, thank the committee members for their endurance, and we will meet again on the 29th. So meeting adjourned. Thank you.